So I've just finished watching Alex Rider, which landed on Amazon just a short while ago, and it's based on the Anthony Horowitz books. Basically, these are sort of teen spy books. There was a movie that came out in 2006, but we don't really want to talk about that because it was absolute garbage. Really sorry, but it wasn't very good. So what is this about? Well, this is kind of like a very young James Bond, I suppose, but not as much gadgets involved. It's a bit more of a sort of thinking James Bond, and basically they use and I say use, they really do use this poor kid. They use him to infiltrate a place called Point Blank in France, and he can only get in because he is a young teenager. He's about 16 years old, but luckily his uncle, not certain of his father's origins yet, because I certainly haven't read the books. Not certainly, but I haven't read the books. They're for teenagers, and I'm not really a teenager, though I apparently once was. At least that's what my mother tells me. Anyway, I haven't read the books. So this is a show that basically follows a 16-year-old who is quite smart. Why? Well, his uncle was basically an MI6 agent, and he is, in the first episode, killed. So Alex is pissed off. He is recruited by these very shady characters in MI6 even, and or sort of, they sort of push him to go and find out what happened to his uncle whilst uncovering a conspiracy. Of course, it's a global conspiracy. And at first I was hesitant to watch this. I'm not really into teen kind of shows like this. I think the last time I really enjoyed watching something similar to this was probably Harry Potter, even though those are movies. I'm also talking about reading the books, I suppose. But this sort of caught me. I watched the first episode and I was like, wow, the pacing is pretty damn good. It doesn't throw itself straight onto the bed of gadgets are us. And the acting is phenomenal. It was really, really great. I usually get irritated with younger actors. Usually they are over the top when it comes to acting, trying to fill in what they think should be happening. Often they underact and they just come across as a sort of wooden board kind of thing. But this is really well done. The actor over here is Otto Farrand, who plays Alex. He's really great. I think the guy's going to go places. He is definitely going to go places. He is attractive, I suppose. He definitely brings a certain charm to this, and at the same time, he is really great at bringing like pain. He's got a couple of moments in this where he has to show screaming, like whether he's being tortured or not, whether he's upset about certain things. And even though he is held back by a certain degree of plot writing, I'll get to that in a minute, he manages to work with the material that he has. Getting back to the plot thing, the plot is pretty contrived. I mean, it's a spy thriller, okay? It's basically kids are being brainwashed. It's a slight spoilers over here. Kids are being brainwashed and then sent out in the world to replace their equivalents. I won't get into any more of that. And he has to go and do the same sort of thing. Well, not the same sort of thing, but he has to go to the school. So, yeah, the plot is contrived. The MI6 agents you would expect to be a lot smarter than the ones in this. The ones in this are pretty fucking stupid. They get to conclusions at very late sort of moments where you would be like, come on, really? They also have this whole global conspiracy thing, which has been done to death. But again, these are based on books from quite a while ago. So it's not like they're trying to reinvent the wheel. So yes, I think the majority has worked very, very well. The plot, again, as I say, was a bit far-fetched, pretty far-fetched actually, and had a lot of sort of plot holes in it too. Actually, quite a few plot holes in it, and I can't really get into that without going into massive spoiler territory. But what saves this show is the acting. It's very, very well done. The down-to-earthness, I would say. As I keep mentioning, there's no big gadgets in this. I don't think there's any gadget other than a MP3 player that also works as a smartphone, which basically are what smartphones are these days. So it is kind of grounded in reality. They do make some mistakes, however, with stating very, very big plot blocking things. Like, for example, you can't leave the school because you will die. It's -0 degrees or whatever outside. And yet another character is able to suddenly do this. You're like, but I thought you said that... And that kind of thing. Those kind of issues in the plot kind of piss you off. At least it pissed me off. The show also is not certain exactly where it wants to go, because there are quite horrific things in this. I mean, you've got torture, for example, torture of a 16-year-old. While it is not waterboarding or nails being pulled off your hand, it is quite intense watching a young teenager get tortured kind of story. So that is kind of heavy stuff. But at the same time, there is no blood in this. That being said, there are plenty of people who get shot. Lots of people who get shot, as a matter of fact. And people who get stabbed and die immediately once being stabbed. So, of course, there's no blood splatter or anything like that. So I'd say in this, it's a little bit, sometimes you're like, is this for adults or is this for young teenagers? Because if I was a teenager and I was watching this, I would get bored. And the reason I say that is not because it's a bad show. I think it's far from it. I think it's actually a very good show. I think people would get bored of it because they're used to Jason Bourne, for example. And as much as I love to hate that, because I think there are some amazing things in the new movies, people expect that frenetic energy, that boom, 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 and a camera, of course, being rolled down a hill, and then the cameraman saying, "I'm meant to do that." Luckily, the camera work in this is phenomenal. Actually, I think the directing in this is actually really, really good. There are some beautiful shots, and a couple of the shots in the school, this Point Blank in France, reminded me very much of a sort of building suspense, almost like you've gone to the Shining level. Stanley Kubrick, nice long shots, parallel, and all that kind of stuff. So the directing is great in this, but they're not certain exactly where it wants to be. Is this a kid's show? Because you've got, obviously, children running around. Or is it for adults? Because you have adult themes in this too. And at the same time, it's also a spy show too, which they really do not go heavily into. And I really mean that. As far as Alex, he has been trained by his uncle his whole life, and we never really find out how he's been trained. There's one particular part when he's being tortured. I'm not going to go into anything more than, don't worry. But he's being tortured, and they're like, "Oh my God, how is he not cracking? He's been trained by his uncle." And it's like, well, how do you train someone to not break in torture? I mean, did he have a bath and the uncle would hold him underwater? How do you do that? Accidentally, surreptitiously train someone to withstand torture without knowing they're being trained. So there's little weird things going on there. And as I say, it is a spy thriller, of course. It is a spy show, but there's very little spying going on by the main character, by Alex himself. He is pretty good at fighting. He knows, and I forget the name of what he mentions, it's like, I know Kung Fu, but not quite Kung Fu. I think it's a style of fighting that is basically army-derived. So he's pretty good at that. He's pretty good at, I suppose, snowboarding. So he's not really spy material, other than the fact that you can't break him when you're not quite sure how. It's very much a, he's a spy because he's a spy. Quite frankly, he didn't exactly come to the table like Neo did when he learned to be the one kind of thing. In this, he's just a teenager. He has one or two quirks that he is, good at fighting kind of story. But he manages to get through this because he is quite a cool kid. He is certainly motivated by, the death of his uncle. And I think, as I mentioned, Otto really does a good job with carrying this. I think if they'd used another actor that wasn't as strong or intense as him, it would have flopped quite a lot. But I think he did a very good job with this. So I would recommend it. If you're a teenager, I'm not certain if you're going to be able to sit through 8 episodes, or almost an hour each, without getting a little bit bored. I think for adults, we could probably sit there a lot easier because we're expecting something a bit more cranial. But as I say, I don't see 13-year-olds really lapping this up. I think they would expect something a little bit more fast-paced. Even though there are quite cool action beats in this, very James Bond, I don't see people, younger people, loving this as much as maybe older people. So again, there's a little bit of an imbalance there on exactly who this is for. I personally would give this a nice 75 out of 100. Again, brilliant cinematography, really great filming, good music track as well, very, very good. Great acting too, but it's kind of let down a little bit on the plot points and some of the gaping chasms in plot holes that are peppered throughout it. But definitely worth a watch. Catch you later.